a scientist.
Suffice it that the blood of 1,000 men and women was spilled within these walls. Limbs twisted and broken, eyes gouged from bloody sockets, flesh burned black.
Please. You await the dead. In death, there are no accidents, no coincidences, no mishaps, and no escapes. What you have to realize is that we're all just a mouse that a cat has by the tail.
You are listening to 90.9 WQFS. Welcome to Jay Scott's World of the Unexplained. Tonight, your host, Jay Scott, will guide you through the world of the paranormal. If you are faint, weak of heart, or fear the unknown, then turn your radio off now. Otherwise, listen at your own risk.
The number you have reached, 911, has been changed to a non-published number.
Hey, Mark, how's it going? It's Jay Scott. How are you?
Real good.
Great, great. Tell everyone out there exactly what Planet X is for those folks that may be listening that have never heard about this before.
Planet X is a celestial body that is part of our solar system. It's a cross between a sun and a normal planet. Some will call it a brown dwarf. Instead of orbiting around just our sun, it orbits around our twin sun as well. Few are aware we have a twin sun in our system. The majority of solar systems out there are found to be binary. Ours is average in that regard. The only difference with our binary solar system is our twin is dark. And it
Meaning it's dead, or?
Pardon me?
Meaning it's like a dead sun, or?
Well, if you want to call it dead, I mean, I'm of the opinion that everything's alive in some respect, but this just does not emit light.
Okay.
So if you want to call it dead, it has been called dead because it doesn't emit light.
Did it emit light at one point in time?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I couldn't tell you. Anyway, so this planet orbits around both of our suns in our binary solar system instead of one. So the orbit is rather long compared to the rest of the orbits that we're used to. It's approximately 3,600 years.
Okay.
It's also rather large compared to Earth. It's 4 to 5 times the size of Earth, and 20 to 25 times its mass, and being kind of like a partial sun itself, like I said, a cross between a planet and a sun, it's a lot more dense. So it carries a lot more weight when it passes. It kind of bullies the planets around, so to speak.
And now you believe this is going to occur? This red dwarf is going to pass between Earth and our sun.
That's correct.
And you believe that's going to happen sometime in the spring, late spring, early summer of 2003.
All right, that's the information that has been passed to me. If it happens to happen a few months later, or even into 2004, I don't know absolutely for sure. That is the information passed to me. Many have said spring 2003. Others have simply stated 2003 and haven't looked at the springtime. My last confirmation came when I was staying down in New Mexico here about a month ago for 3 weeks next to the VLA. And from a source within the VLA, they're saying 2004. Really, just to be ready for spring 2003 would certainly be prudent, as opposed to thinking, well, I'm going to wait till I see it in the sky, which, you wouldn't have but a few weeks probably before the passage at that time, maybe 6 or 8 weeks or something.
Now, the way that you, from what I've read from your book, the way that you describe the changes that this Planet X is going to bring to Earth is basically a shifting in the crust of the Earth's surface.
Well, I'd like to explain it a little better now that I have a greater understanding. About a month and a half ago, I did a conference with a Professor James McKenney.
Yeah, I'm familiar with
Master of Science, and he's been a professor at Cornell University, which is a university that a lot of the NASA people are sent through. And he knows what any PhD in astronomy knows, and astrophysics, and he's a nuclear physicist himself. Also, he's had, in fact, he's gone down to South America and been part of the archaeological dig, so he's got a broad-based knowledge of this subject. And how he describes it is when a celestial body, a larger one, passes a smaller one, there is an electromagnetic gravitational wave, a wake of this planet, if you will, that hits the smaller one. And this happens at a distance. In fact, his term is action at a distance. This thing never strikes Earth, but it affects it greatly. So when this wave hits, you can imagine that the crust itself will experience tidal waves. And this will go through the entire mantle of the Earth, and when it's done, the crust will be in a different place relative to the poles. So that is what you call a shift.
And that also brings up a point I wanted to mention about the polar ice caps melting and then reforming, what you describe in your book as a fast freeze. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, yeah. From the flash-frozen mastodons, the mammoths that have been found in Siberia, it's obvious that they were grazing in a tropical environment. They found, tropical flowers in their stomach, and the sled dogs. In fact, they've even sold this stuff on the open market for humans to eat once they uncovered this frozen meat. And if that meat even laid around for a day after it died,
it would be spoiled.
It wouldn't be good thousands of years later to consume. So, where the crust stops, where the poles currently are, and they're always steady relative to the sun, that will flash freeze. But you won't have the kind of ice buildup that you have now on the poles, where the new poles stop. That will take quite a bit of time, but the cold itself will be very quick. It'll happen instantly.
What kind of degree shifts are we talking about here?
Well, you can imagine the difference between a tropical environment and the North or South Pole.
Oh, Lord.
Okay, so that would be the kind of difference. Now, if it shifts from a place that's close to the pole and then it becomes the pole, then of course the degree shift would be slightly less. But it could be that dramatic, like with these mastodons, these mammoths that were flash frozen. I mean, this happens on a regular basis. Ecological evidence is really rather clear.
You bring a lot of that forth in your book. Actually, your book is just loaded with lots of different news clippings and lots of information from scientists as well as spiritualists. I found it very, very interesting, and historically, it's backed up by a lot of different sources. Anyone listening that does want a copy of Mark's book, they can get it at www.planetx2003.com. But going back, Mark, the wealth of information that's in here is just, it's insane. And the government obviously doesn't want people to know, or the controllers, as you call them, in the government, the few that do know about it, that control the financial aspects of the economy, don't want people to know about this.
Well, actually, they may be behind some of the disclosures that are happening now.
Guilty conscience.
Well, no, not necessarily. There's some there, of course. It's a combination of things. They may be saying that this date of spring 2003 themselves to set up kind of a cry of wolf and discredit anyone that's been identifying that. Now, I'm not going to say that 100% for sure because I don't know. But, if that happens, I would say, if that date comes and goes, I would say, hey, very shortly thereafter, because we're experiencing all the preliminary effects of a large Planet X-type object having already pierced the magnetic field of the sun. So I would keep your eyes open and understand it won't be but a few weeks or a few months after that. So, yes, they are behind the disclosures, but not necessarily because they feel guilty, but there may be some of that going on. So it's the combination thereof, I suppose.
Yeah, it's quite a cover-up. I know you mentioned one of the hurricanes. I believe it was in Florida.
Yes.
Years ago, that the death count was basically lied about. As far as how many bodies were actually discovered, how many were found, there was a lot of speculation on the part of the media as to, there's this many, and then, that's it. And people that were in that area were basically forced out.
Yeah, Hurricane Andrew in 1992, I've talked to at least a dozen individuals, being a Floridian myself at one point. In fact, I just moved from there after 15 years. It is very clear for the people down there that there were thousands of deaths, that they cordoned off the area, they kept the news media away from the body pickup. It went on for weeks, picking up body parts and bodies and throwing them into refrigerator trucks and then carrying them off to the dumps and burning them. And this just went on and on and on. In fact, I just, in the middle of a rewrite of my book, and I really fleshed out that section with a lot more evidence to show how and why the powers that be do this kind of thing, this kind of cover-up. And it really mainly has to do with money. I mean, they want to keep the economy of Florida going down there and the tourism dollars. And if they found out that the nuclear plant down there was damaged and there was a nuclear incident and thousands of people that were killed during this hurricane, the tourism industry and the real estate market would dry up down there.
Oh, yeah. A lot of big money down there, too.
Yeah, and the same way with this. This is a greater event, so they're doing the same thing. I mean, they're doing this with a lot more foresight because, they've known about this thing for some 20 years. I mean, they actually made an announcement that they found it back at the end of 1983. An official government source, the chief scientist of the infrared astronomical satellite, announced to 6 dailies at the time. Now, a week or so later, they tried to backtrack off of that disclosure and say it didn't happen or try to rewrite history, but that's something that they can't actually do, although they've done a good job at trying to keep this down.
What's going to happen when this planet passes, or when X passes our planet? What kind of death toll are we talking about here?
All right, well, I don't want to get into a specific death toll right this minute. First of all, I want to say that if anyone's being exposed to this knowledge and they start digging into it and found out the truth of it, more than likely they are getting this information for a reason. In other words, I'm going to talk from a spiritual basis here. If you understand this thing is coming, my strong suggestion to you is there is a reason for it, and you're going to be probably taking a good look at your entire life and possibly reevaluating everything in it to get ready for this. And part of that process, hopefully, is to draw to you through your own visualization or action the ability to survive this thing. Just getting away from the shorelines may be enough for some people, but each person is going to have a different experience depending on what they expect. But I would strongly suggest to stay positive about what is going to happen, because there's all kinds of exciting things to happen after the shift itself that I'm aware of that is up and coming. And this is, like I said, from spiritual sources that I've read, and it's a very important component of this subject. Now, as far as the the death toll goes, well, from a NASA source, they expect, after the hour of the shift, that the waters will come in and slosh back and forth from the oceans on the shorelines. And 95% of the population of the world lives within 50 to 100 miles of the shorelines, and so they expect 2/3 of the population to perish. But, this is a spiritual event. This is supposed to be a time when it is a time where a certain percentage of the population is supposed to graduate, so to speak, and go on to a lot better, lighter existence. And the people that are born here that are going to be leaving, that there's a perfection in that too. They're not ready. They're not ready to graduate. They're supposed to go on. They knew very well beforehand that this event was going to happen and they weren't going to survive it. So I have to look at it with a very positive light. Otherwise, I'm not doing my job here.
Uh-huh. 2/3 of the population. That's a lot. What do these controllers or these people that do know about it, that do have the big money? Now, obviously, NASA's not going to disclose it because it would have mass hysteria, lootings, murders. God, you can imagine.
Well, there may be a certain point where they have to come clean. That's why all the people that are naysaying Planet X, always that are being directed from NASA, always state they are unconnected to NASA. They are totally unofficially connected to NASA. They make that clear over and over. In fact, it is so prevalent when you understand this that you can identify who these people are in an instant just by those constant restating of being unconnected to NASA. Now, the reason NASA is not naysaying Planet X officially is because at a certain point they have to.
Oh, if you can see it in the sky, I mean.
Yeah, when it's very obvious to everyone that it's inbound, that'll be the point where they say, "Oh, look at what we have here."
God, how did we miss this? Our telescopes just didn't catch it.
Exactly, and then they'll go on and say, "Well, it's going to pass millions of miles away, so don't worry about it. It'll be another passing object. We've identified hundreds over the last few months, and that's what they're doing right now, which they never have. They're just in a constant flow of information as far as all the different celestial bodies they're identifying now, so that this will just become one of the mix. It'll get lost in the horde of new planets and different objects that they're identifying out there. Oh, it's not going to hit us. Don't worry, it's going to pass right by. Which it will. It will pass right by, but action at distance, if you look at the ecological evidence, it's going to wreak havoc on the surface of the planet.
Cataclysmic changes.
Cataclysmic changes, as far as I'm concerned, for me, are going to be exciting, because if you have any spiritual connection at all, if you got just a positive attitude towards this thing, you're going to draw that experience to yourself. Because every time this thing goes by, there's a large percentage of the population survives. There should be hundreds of billions of people that survive this time. So it's not going to be that difficult being one of them. But if you see yourself as fighting yourself out of some sort of Mad Max scenario, you'll probably draw that experience to yourself, and your chances of survival will be slim. But if you see yourself cooperating with people, getting to a place where there's communities set up that will be working with each other to help each other survive, you'll draw that experience to you. And that is probably one of the most significant things that I can explain as far as part of this whole event. It is actually an uplifting of humanity. The people that are ready to step up will be there. You can't stop it. It's like there's some sort of perfection going on. There's a grand scheme, a grand plan that's being played out, and everyone is going to be playing the role as they should. And at the last minute, I think you can change what your role will be. And if that is to survive, you will.
Now you mentioned Mad Max, and that's honestly really what I thought about when I read about this, and I really sat down and thought about what would happen if all these people were to die, and all of this land mass, all these land masses were to shift. I mean, we're talking about possibly having new continents over this. Am I correct in saying that?
That's correct. When these waves go through the crust or the mantle of the earth, it'll be just like the sixth seal, if you've read any biblical text in Revelations. Mountains will fall, and mountains will build, and every corner of the earth, every wall will fall. But this is always survivable for a certain percentage of the population. So yes, there will be areas that experience these Mad Max scenarios, and I strongly suggest to get away from the cities at this time. Major metropolitan areas is not where you really want to be. And if you feel that this is too much for you to deal with, then maybe it's your time to leave this existence and go on to another one.
Beach,
and not
right?
deal with it, ignore it, turn away. I mean, I'm not saying that everyone should follow. Everyone should follow their heart when it comes to this. They should follow their own gut instincts and intuition. What that is telling them, and that is not always the same for each individual. In fact, it's very different for each individual. In fact.
Going back to this controller issue that I was bringing up earlier with the massive amounts of cash that they're still stuffing in their pockets, and them knowing about it, having the foreknowledge, what are they going to do? Right? I mean, I'm assuming they're planning to ride this thing out, and I'm assuming that the U.S. government plans on riding this thing out in basically some kind of safe house.
All right, well, when you say U.S. government, you're talking about a lot of good people, and then there's a little small percentage at the top that are these controllers.
That actually know what's going on.
Yeah. So, basically the average person that works for the government does not know about this and are just good people doing their job. But these controllers, they have been for the last 20 years and maybe longer, they've dug some 129 underground cities all over the United States that are interconnected with rail system even. They've used these large atomic diggers that run so hot that the holes turn to glass as they go through, and they're as wide as 4-lane highways. They've been packing their MREs, these meals ready to eat, round the clock, 3 shifts for years and years. So they're going to be ready, but they're just now coming to the understanding that all that preparation, the trillions of dollars they've spent, and that is a correct figure when you think about the other governments of the world doing the same thing, may be for naught. They may be creating their own tomb, because I would not want to be under the ground when it ships in any facility. Because when this wave goes through the crust, I don't care what your calculations are and what kind of great scheme of some hole that you've dug. I mean, I don't expect it, but a very few of them to hold up, and they may be coming around to this realization now also, and starting to get in a rather high fear mode. In other words, it's these controllers themselves that are probably in more fear than anyone else that is fully aware of this issue, because they have the most to lose. They want to keep controlling. They want to stay on top. They know that their cash is not going to be worth anything, so they have to turn it into goods right now. And no one's going to listen to them or pay attention to them, especially if they're entombed. They're going to be gone. So the rest of the people, in fact, the guy on the street, if he happens to get wind of this and gets in a survivable area that doesn't have any cash in his pocket but's used to, fiending for himself and getting by, he may be better off than the person who's, told everyone else around them what to do their entire lives and doesn't know how to do anything else.
There's nothing to barter with because the cash is useless.
Yeah. Well, they might have something to barter with, but how long are you going to listen to these guys in the after times when their power is gone?
But the power. I mean, the power hungry. You're totally correct. I mean, if there's no one that will listen to, to their directives anymore, where do they go?
Yeah, that's why they're in the highest state of fear compared to everyone else.
Now, where do you think? And I don't know if this is. I don't know how you come to this, but where do you think the safest place is going to be to survive this event?
All right. Well, you can use your logic, and of course, well away from the shorelines, upwards of 1,000 feet or higher. Not in the mountains, because that's where more than likely mountain building will happen again. If you can, build yourself a shelter. Get some secondhand sandbags and sand, and you can build yourself a nice little dome that'll survive high winds and earthquakes. Now, having said that, there's no specific one place in the world that is going to be absolutely safe. And your safety has got to be found within your consciousness. In other words, you have to get right with your own inner self and what you see, where you see your life going, and what you see on the other side of this event. And if you can see yourself surviving this, and that's no big deal, if you got that mindset inside of your mind, you will survive it. You'll draw those experiences to you. So that's why I keep going back to you might call your spiritual protection. It's are you right with the universe? Is this going to be your time to shine? Do you feel that? I mean, more than anything else, it will be your gut that'll tell you, and what you focus on with that you'll draw to you, and not just what you focus on. There'll be a certain point where your gut instincts, your intuition will draw you to a certain area or to a certain action, and that'll help you survive.
What are you planning on doing to survive? Are you making preparations to build? I think we talked about that before, to build.
Okay, I've got in the back of my mind that I'm going to do that. I have not done it yet. I have done one thing very significant, and that is get out of Florida. Florida is not going to be a good place to be. It is virtually at sea level. The waters will come in from either side, and California is not going to be a safe place. Maybe they'll find a few islands afterwards, and if you're on top of that mountain that didn't go down, but who knows? I wouldn't be in California or Florida or lower Texas or Louisiana or lower Alabama or any of those places, anywhere along the shoreline.
What about for our listeners here in North Carolina?
North Carolina. You know what? You guys are lucky.
Really?
Oh yeah, I've looked at from intuitive sources, from just my own logic, and that's one of the few places that should be a great place to survive. In fact, the powers that be know that too, and a lot of them have already got their property there.
Really?
Oh yeah, North Carolina should be a good place to be.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, it is good.
It's very good.
I got a grown son, and some of his friends are running up, about 5 of his friends are running up to North Carolina just to learn how to build domes right now.
Now, what will these domes that you talk about? What are they constructed out of?
Well, if you got major bucks, you go down to Italy, Texas. You contact Monolithic Dome Home. You have them build one for you, right? But if you're just a guy out on the street and you want to build one real quick and you don't have much money, you go and get a hold of these secondhand sandbags, okay? And you get some barbed wire. And that's all you need. Fill those sandbags with, hopefully, some sand, and dirt's not going to be as good, but fill them up and make a circle, and then throw down some of that barbed wire, and that'll hold the bags together as you continue to build up the bags to a point where on top it completes the dome. Now, it's a little more to it than that. If you go on my site and click on Overview, planetx2003.com, and click on Overview, about a third of the way down, I got a list of URLs for domes. But I'm sure if you put that into a search engine, you'll find a lot more. But the first one happens to be the Hobbit Hut that I'm trying to explain here. It's rather inexpensive, that anyone can do, and it doesn't cost much money.
Now, why would just as a question, why would that be safer than, say, your house?
Well, your house cannot withstand high winds. There's going to be high winds at the time worldwide.
We're talking about tornadoes and hurricanes, force winds.
Hurricanes and hemicanes. Hemicanes will be forming on land. That's the same as a hurricane forming on land.
Oh, wow.
And tornadoes. When the shift happens itself, it does drag the atmosphere with it. Okay, but there's about a deficit of some 200 miles an hour between it dragging the atmosphere and how fast it's moving. So you can expect that level of wind to be happening. At the same time, you're going to be experiencing quakes. Once they get past 9 on the Richter scale, they don't feel much different, but they'll probably break the Richter scales. So you're going to have high quakes and high winds, and these sort of structures can withstand those things, these domes, high winds and quakes. Now, the worst part of this situation, as far as death toll goes, will be the water. So you want to be away from the shorelines. If you're away from the shorelines, at the very least, you got a fighting chance. Now, if you're up about 1,000 feet or higher, you're in a hell of a lot better ballpark. And if you're not near a major metropolitan center, you're probably in a great spot. But you got to follow your intuition. You got to really feel out a different place, and to say, does this feel right to me? I mean, you really have to try to get in touch with your own gut instincts, your spiritual side, if you want to suggest that.
So we're talking tidal waves on the scale of like Deep Impact, the Hollywood versions where the ocean waves come, God knows how high.
Why do you think Hollywood has been putting out in-time films for the last 20 years or so? I mean, these people are intuitive. I grew up in Hollywood, okay? They are open to what is coming, and they may not understand exactly what's coming, and some of the people may actually be in touch with some of these inside government people and actually putting out these kind of films on purpose. They're getting us ready, at least unconsciously, for this kind of event.
No.
And this is the reason for it, this passing planet. I mean, I had a casual interest in prophecy of Earth changes for 20 years. I never knew why. But then my son and I both had simultaneous Earth change dreams in Florida. We both dreamed of tidal waves.
Really?
Right, and that's what prompted me to dig into this. He dreamed of a tidal wave coming. He had comic book superhero powers in this dream and got away from him. Well, within 2 days, I had the same dream, except when I was getting away from the first one, I was met by another one coming from the direction I was running from the first one.
Man.
Now, where can that happen? In Central Florida. So at that time, I thought, well, I've worked on my diet and did a little spiritual work off and on throughout my life. I know that I can find out anything if I want to. So I decided at that point I want to know why and I want to know when. And at that point, I didn't know. And sure enough, after 36 hours of kind of a prayer state and active searching around, I found this. I mean, there was a thread in some of these Earth change prophecies that I kind of overlooked, of a passing comet, a rogue planet, or a star that comes into our system, if you will. And sure enough, I found out that our solar system has this extra planet. And if you go back through ancient historical records, every culture identifies this planet in a different way. They have different names. That's why I have 35 names for this planet, mainly from ancient historical sources of the past. They all say what to look for. They all have great respect for this planet when it passes because they know what it means when this thing passes.
Know what to expect.
Right, and then, of course, I thought, well, if the ancient historical evidence is there, then the ecological evidence should show it. And sure enough, these people that are identifying ice ages, which is kind of a misnomer, and, studying the Earth back thousands of years, it all comes together. In fact, I have evidence back 14 passages. I mean, this thing comes every 3,600 years, and it basically offs the civilization that is standing at the time.
Now, that brings up an interesting question. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I'm wondering this, and I'm sure a lot of people listening are wondering, you talk about that, and you think back to Atlantis, the lost city of Atlantis. You think back to the pyramids for one thing, or things of that nature, where you wonder what height technology rose to before this kind of change takes place, and then you find evidence of ancient cultures that had this or that had that. How do you feel about that? Well, as far as just the Atlantis thing, or any of the past civilizations, how far technologically do you think that they? I mean, do you think that any past civilization got as technologically sophisticated as we are today?
Absolutely. In fact, if you really dig into that side of it, which I already did, but didn't put much of it in my book. I just mentioned that there were past civilizations called Nibiru, Atlantis, and probably a long list of others that we're not even aware of. But certainly, if you look at Atlantis and you really study that was a worldwide civilization. It wasn't just one continent that went down. And their technology was a lot different than ours, but in some ways a lot more sophisticated. I mean, each new civilization that comes up, if they become high-tech at a certain point before the next passage, they develop different areas and, different kinds of technology. But certainly, yes, Atlantis did exist. It had ships that we would call flying saucers today. It was a megalith kind of civilization. In other words, the buildings that they built were rather large. They used rather large stone technology that we cannot duplicate today.
Huh.
There's no way. There's no one on Earth can duplicate the Great Pyramid as it stands. These structures, these large stones, they're cut to a 10,000th of an inch. There's no mortar between them. We don't have that technology. How they did it, who knows?
They still don't know, and they still speculate.
Still don't know.
But they have no idea.
Right. But our civilization today is probably more advanced than theirs in some ways, and more backward than others. It's a mixed bag.
When this change happens, going away from the technological aspect, but going back to the survival aspect of the whole thing, I'm assuming that a lot of wildlife is going to perish also.
Yeah, that's true.
And you wonder where are these people? How are you going to eat?
All right. Well, here's the best of my understanding as far as that goes, and probably the reason why I'm involved with this is part of this setup. And in fact, I believe that I have been spiritually guided to do this work, and part of what I've done with my life is study food and its effects on the body and how much you need, etc. Starting at the age of 11, I discovered something known as breatharianism. There are people on this planet who don't even eat. There are other people that just live off of juices and then goes down from there. Fruitarianism, vegans, vegetarianism, and so on and so forth. I myself eat very little food throughout the day. I've experimented on myself such that I understand that the need for eating is not as great as what we think that you do need, at a minimum. And there are people, in China, there are people that are just spontaneously quitting eating, and they don't have anything, any knowledge of what is known as breatharianism here. So I'm suggesting to you, at a minimum, that the need to eat will be lessened. The amount of food that will be consumed in the future will be a lot less, possibly along the lines of what you have as an infant. As an infant, you're consuming food that has got higher water content. So if you were today to start consuming, let's say, mainly fruit juices and only just a few bites a day of solids, which is something I did last year for about 6 months.
Wow.
What happens is
you lose weight.
Your system, your skin, your organs start to go back to what they were before. They become, very smooth. They get that same youthful texture again, and it actually reverses the aging process. So
you're looking at the fat America right now too. Look at our overweight. Generally, your middle class, and it's just very overloaded with calories. You get the McDonaldization of America, and eat more fat, eat more meat that you don't need.
Well, you don't need all this. And I'm not saying that you should go on any specific diet one way or the other, but I am suggesting that if you're caught in a situation where there's very little food, I'm saying, hey, rejoice. In other words, you can get by with a few bites of food a day and get real comfortable with it. And I've done this to myself over the years, this diet discipline, to understand that, the first few days that you have the most amount of hunger when you really cut down the amount of food that you're eating. Let's say you go on a liquid diet. And then after that, your body adjusts, and you actually start to get an increase in energy once some of this toxicity flows out of you, which is what brings you down and makes you tired in the beginning. It's not so much that you're not eating, it's that your body is finally given a chance to cleanse itself. It throws all this stuff out into your bloodstream, and then you feel bad and you attribute it to not eating. Well, you're not getting your energy so much from food, and it's not bringing you down so much when you don't eat. It's the cleansing process that's bringing you down. If you just ride it through, which you may be forced to do in the after times, you could end up extending extending your life quite a bit because you're not eating as much, and you could get more youthful at the same time and have more energy. So that's an angle that I want to put out there so people to understand that don't sweat not having a lot of food around.
No need for the herbal supplements, right?
Right. So many different teenagers they forget to eat for days on end, and then they'll gorge on pizza, and then they just get meal after meal. They look fine. They have energy. I know I was one at one point.
Now, speaking of the food situation, there's also a water situation to think about too. As far as are some waters going to be stagnant? As far as maybe some of the waters that are fresh water now may turn salt water. You're not going to be able to drink it.
You want to be extremely careful what you consume in the after times, even. And water is one of the things you want to pay attention to. Are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's going to be all kinds of contamination in the water. There's going to be a major pollution event that'll happen during this passage. In fact, for possibly as much as 6 or 8 weeks, there's going to be a fine dust in the air, and you should be wearing some cloth over your mouth or some sort of mask if you go outside, or have filters inside of wherever you happen to be. There's the dust and the volcanic debris that'll happen because the majority of the volcanoes go off worldwide, and this is not something that's going to sneak up on you. Okay, it may not come in spring 2003, may come a few months later. I'm not sure, but once it does enter into our solar system, everyone's going to see this at least 8 weeks prior to it coming. So they're going to have time to get away from the shorelines and do at least some preparation, which may be all that some people need.
But you were saying about the water.
Yeah, the water.
What would you recommend?
All this dust and the comet's tail. This thing turns into a gigantic comet. Has so much debris in it that it's going to contaminate the water. So you might want to get a hold of some sort of non-electrical water distiller, which they sell at this point. They're still not out of those. I know the meals ready to eat, the civilian version, you can't order them anymore. They're completely backed up.
Oh, you're kidding me.
To infinity. No. The civilian version, the company that used to handle those, they don't handle any orders. There's too many people ordering them. And in fact, there's a few of these very expensive shelters. In fact, the majority of congressmen have already bought them. And you can't order a few of these now because they're back ordered to infinity. They will not take any more orders. So these are the kinds of things that are going to be in short supply. These water filters and masks to deal with the dust, and these shelters. You want to try to deal with that situation as early as possible. Seeds are probably more important than stocking up on food. If you can get non-terminator seeds, the seeds that haven't been tampered with and genetically altered so that they only last one season, they won't produce seeds themselves. Jesus, these people. Then you'll be ahead of the game because some of these seeds are made to grow in a dark environment, like inside your place, and within 4 or 6 days you can have sprouts that you can eat. I've experienced so much on my diet. I could live off of just a handful of sprouts every day. It wouldn't faze me at all. And people just to understand that you can do that is a real awakening to your own power. But yeah, go for seeds. Try to get some sort of water purifier if you can. Even a filter, possibly filters will do. I know at first the rain that comes down will have a lot of the dust particles in it, but there's going to be a lot of rain in the after times, and at a certain point that rain will become pure, and you can gather some of that rain for your water, but not during the event, not while the dust is still sitting in the air.
No, you talked earlier about your spiritual, and connecting with yourself, the spiritual aspect of all this. What is your spiritual state of being, I guess I should say? Or do you subscribe to any kind of organized religion, or is this just a personal inner spiritual thing?
Well, okay, over the years I've studied what is known as Kundalini Yoga, but I'm not necessarily subscribing to any organization. I've looked at a lot of different spiritual texts, and they all have at their core, the same basic message, to treat your fellow man as you would want to be treated. And when you look at someone that, you see that your own eyes in themselves. No, I don't subscribe to any specific religion. I don't even practice, Kundalini yoga on a regular basis, although, maybe every week or two I might do some of it. It's very individual, this kind of thing. You have to just begin to listen to what your own self is telling you. I mean, no matter who is speaking to you on any subject, you got to run it through your filter. In fact, Buddha said that no matter who is saying what, run it through your own filter first and decide for yourself, including myself. So he was saying, don't even listen to me unless it rings true inside of you. And if you can find that own voice within your side yourself, and if you can treat other people exactly how you would want to be treated, I mean, that's about as spiritual as you're going to get.
I see.
That's what I subscribe to.
Okay, fair enough. What's been the public reaction to what you've been doing? I mean, in general.
Well, in general, the majority of the people that I'm in contact with are just extremely thankful that I pulled together this information for them, because, after I had those simultaneous dreams, I started to do with my son and I started to dig into this, and, I did thousands of pages of research here,
Oh, I can tell. I can tell by the book and all the information you present.
And then, I developed a certain level of clarity, and I thought, hold it. Out of all these sources that I got this information from, none are really presenting it in a manner that you can grasp quickly and easily. And some of them have problems. Some of them are too spiritual. And, not everyone's going to read that kind of stuff. Some have, aliens and that's mixed in too heavily with the information. Others just pure government source that's just too dry. And I thought to myself, it's not being presented in a fashion where, the average person can pick up a book and read it and get up to speed on it. So, I felt kind of a burden on me after doing this research and getting this clarity that I thought, given my Hollywood upbringing, that I could pull together, the most significant glaring pieces of this information from a wide array of sources, put it into one book, and get anyone up to speed on the situation real quick.
No, yeah, going back to that, your Hollywood background, didn't your father used to write songs for Nancy Sinatra?
Yeah, he actually produced one for Frank Sinatra that hit #1 called Something Stupid.
I know the song. Yeah, it's a great song.
And then he had 40 or 50 hits with Nancy back in the 60s. I suppose his #1 claim to fame was Boots Are Made for Walking. But
really?
I kind of like some of the duets they did, like Summer Wine and Some Velvet Morning. Those are the nicest ones. In fact, U2 has even dredged up some of these old songs and has started doing them.
Really? Yeah, I'm a big U2 fan.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
I saw a tape where they did some of the old songs. In fact, that one of those duets that I just mentioned, they did one of those.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So you used your connections in the industry to get this thing out quick. I know it's a self-published book right now.
I did not use any connections.
Oh, you didn't use any
industry to do anything. My father, is in his 70s, and he certainly doesn't have the level of the fame that he used to or connections. So the way I've gotten this information out has been laid out in front of me. In other words, I like to call it as a spiritual setup. I mean, there are probably forces working to get this information out behind the scenes that are not human, are rather angelic sources is what I'm trying to get at here, that are helping me along the way. Because there's one guy up in New York that I never met that just read my book and decided he wanted to get me on a bunch of radio shows, and he did that.
Wow.
And then along the way, some other people started to get me on TV, and now I've done a couple cable shows. Another man wanted to pull together an infomercial, and I've done that. And then someone started suggesting that I should get up in front of people and talk live, and I've never done it before, but I've done that now about a dozen times so far.
So you've been on Art Bell, too, haven't you?
Yeah, January 16th, 17th, I did Art Bell. And I was kind of an unusual one. What happened there, a friend of mine who was driving trucks, so he listened to Art Bell a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Over last Christmas, said that Art Bell had fell in love with my dad's old work and started playing that, some of the Nancy and Lee duets from the 60s, just every night. And so he says, your book is right along the lines of what Art Bell has to offer. This guy was telling me, the guy named Jay, and now he's fallen in love with your dad's work. I mean, you're a shoo-in. All you have to do is call him up. Now, Art has never talked to my dad, doesn't know my dad, but my dad was aware of Art, and Art was certainly aware of my dad. And so during that show, I got my father on, and he talked to Art for the first time.
Oh, wow.
That was kind of crazy. For about 10 minutes there, my dad and him were talking, and it was kind of fun.
Yeah, it sounds neat.
So that's how that came about. So I contacted Art via an email, and I kind of told him the situation about the book I had written and the music that I'm connected to through my father, and that was that.
And you were on the show.
On the Art Bell show.
Well, I know the way that I was actually brought to attention about this information about your book was a friend of mine was at some conference that you were attending, and I think it was a UFO conference.
Right.
And he met you there, and you talked to him about it. He said, hey, because he knew about my show, and he said, I know this guy that would probably be perfect for your show. And he said, check out the website. He pulled up the website, and I looked at it, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. So, I mean, it's amazing how small the world it is, really, if you think about it. Where do you think the whole UFO alien, if you want to call it, connection plays into this?
There's going to be a big connection. I didn't really discuss this in my book, but I have a real good close friend of mine that I hadn't been in touch with for some 28 years. In fact, she used to be a girlfriend of mine.
Really?
I worked for the solar company. If you read my book, I told you I worked for a solar company. We tried to raise the standard of living around the world and wipe out pollution, to bring down the cost of energy.
Big companies aren't going to lose that much money.
Right, through photovoltaics. And we were stopped through, an array of deceptive kind of financial and legal maneuvers. They actually put the top officers in jail, saying that they were fraudulently trying to do something. I mean, these guys are wicked, what they did. And here we are struggling, trying to bring this great technology out, and they're making up all these lies. Jesus. Anyway, there was a young woman who worked with me, with that company, by the name of Lisette Larkins is her name today, and she's written a book called Talking to Extraterrestrials.
Uh-huh.
And she was on Art Bell just recently, August 28th.
Really?
And she's a brilliant communicator. And see, the powers that be really don't want you to understand something about the majority, the vast majority of aliens are enlightened beings. They're along the lines of Buddha and Christ. That's the last thing the powers that be want you to understand about these beings, because there's a very few of them that are negative. And anytime something happens along negative lines, that's the one that they run with and they put over the media and they repeat over and over again, because they don't want you to understand what these beings really are. They're just helpful brothers within our solar system. And Lisette's written a book, like I said, called Talking to Extraterrestrials. Hampton Roads, I think, is her publisher.
Uh-huh.
And I was blown away after, losing touch with her for 28 years, and all of a sudden both of us are authors. Both of us have been on the Art Bell show within 8 months of each other. And both of us, uncoincidentally, this solar company was headed by a guy who was a professor himself of social psychology. And he sent four of us to UCLA, because this company was around Los Angeles at the time, to take a writing course. That's the only course. You
did mention that in your book, actually.
I may have mentioned in my book, but 2 out of 4 of us that I'm aware of have written books.
From that writing course.
Right. And they're kind of along similar lines. I mean, she covers the alien issue beautifully. In fact, she doesn't consider herself an abductee. She considers herself an experiencer. These people are her friends.
So she wrote this book, and she was on the program, and you're both authors now. And where do these figures? Obviously, with the whole Roswell thing, and there's been a lot of government, a lot of alleged government cover-up, over the whole any kind of extraterrestrial, mention. Where do you think these beings play into all this?
Well, they're playing an extremely important role. They are fully aware of what is coming, and they've been getting ready. In fact, they have probably quite a few bases themselves on Earth. Have been getting ready for this event. I mean, what they plan on doing is, this is the best of my understanding. So, I can't prove this one way or the other, but from the best of my understanding, these beings are working with us during this spiritual graduation, such that in the after times, they're going to be helping us set up a better society, and even a higher tech society than what we have now. That doesn't mean that for a short while that we're going to have to go back to a kind of a more rural environment and community, but that'll be a temporary situation. In fact, we may even get help as far as being rescued in certain areas. I mean, if you're at a certain level of consciousness, if your vibrational state is at a point where they understand you're part of the graduating process, I don't believe that you're going to be allowed to be killed, no matter where you're at. I mean, they may come, they may bring their ships here in mass during this event and just pick up people that, according to their computers or whatever technology they use, that have a certain level of consciousness. That's why I keep mentioning that. It's your own connection to your own spirit. It's the way you are. It's who you are that probably draw to you the situation that you'll experience in the aftertime and with this event more than anything else. So we may have a lot of help from our brothers in the galaxy out there.
How many copies of this book have you sold, Mark, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, let's see. I don't really know. See, what happened is probably under 10,000, but certainly over 5. What happened is the powers that be took over my little print-on-demand printer and shut it down. They were fulfilling orders. They were printing up the books. And, in fact, they stole money from my mother. My mother was helping me with a credit card to buy these books. So that's how you do it. You had to buy these books, and then they'd sell them. Well, she put her credit card out to buy 500 books, the last 500 books, and they just took the money, and they didn't fulfill the orders. And now they won't pay me. They owe me thousands of dollars. But I'm not worried about this. This is just a little glitch along the way. I'm doing fine. But they'll go to any lengths to stop this information from getting out. In fact, the longer I do this, the more my reputation on the internet that they are putting out information that I'm some sort of scam artist or something. It just gets worse and worse. I mean, it's just crazy.
Now, the copy of the book I have, I don't know, it's older. I'm looking at it right now. 2001 is copyright date on it. It's by First Publish.
Yeah, you First Publish is the ones that were bought out and taken over and then shut down. Just because my book was their #1 book, and the powers that be thought, how do you stop this from getting out? Well, you buy the publisher,
and shut it down,
and then don't pay the guy, of course. So they haven't paid me. They owe me thousands of dollars. But like I said, I'm not worried about it. That's just one of the little glitch along the way that is very much expected. That I think is kind of amusing because I've set up some little backup systems of printing this book myself and getting it out by several other distributors. Like if you go to my website and click on the cover of the book, it'll bring you to a distributor in Texas that'll fulfill one of the distributors that'll fulfill an order for you.
Okay. And I noticed, I believe I went to Amazon.com to try to get the book, and they're I think not available to order until December or something like that.
Well, that's one of the messages that have been put out by this company all along. That my book is not available to December 2002.
Yeah.
Or it's never even been in print until then. This is one of the devious ways that they're keeping this away from the public. They're saying all year long, my book will not be printed until December 2002. And now, since they've shut the publisher down completely, it is completely out of print. So it went from not being published to December 2002 to out of print. How does that happen? That's the message you'll get if you go into a regular bookstore to try to order it, but you can still order it.
Yeah,
you can get a hold of it.
I actually found my copy to your website. What I was wondering here, I spoke with Cindy, your director.
Right.
And she told me that you were planning on releasing another book, possibly in the future, that dealt with...
we're in the middle of creating that right now. In fact, she's doing most of the work.
Okay. And that's some of your e-discussion groups, your e-groups, Yahoo?
Yeah, we're going to have, there's about 300 messages on the internet. If you go to my website and click on e-groups, and join one of the e-groups there, or just read the messages there, you'll find a book's worth of information there, of new information that has come up since me writing the first one. And we're simply going to, pour that through the spaghetti strainer, so to speak, and put the best messages out. And we're going to really turn this book into, we're going to take it from being more of a spiritual work than the first one.
Okay.
Because that we feel that is the most significant part of this situation. That if you can turn yourself around spiritually, you're going to survive this thing, and it'll be exciting. The world's going to change for the better, and you'll be optimistic about this. If you got the old world consciousness of, well, every man for himself, and I'm going to fight to the death, well, that's probably more than like what you're going to draw to yourself.
Oh, Lord. The Planet X, as it becomes nearer to the Earth, and we're talking, let's just assume it does hit in the spring 2003, like we're predicting.
Okay.
Like you're predicting 2003.
Sometime in 2003,
yeah.
Okay.
Well, let's just assume it hits in May, for example.
Right.
What will we be seeing in March?
This would be from a professor physicist that I keep mentioning. By the way, you can get his text that grounds all this in science that only he is, not only he, but him and a few of his colleagues are aware of. You're going to see our weather really get a lot worse than what it is now, the last couple months. From some, in fact, even James mentioned this, from some native Indian sources, information that's been passed down through the generations. You're going to see what is known as the devil winds worldwide. What happens is when a Planet X type object, and Nibiru would be one of them, and probably the most significant one, comes in and pierces the outside magnetic field of the sun, it starts the sun throwing off flares on a regular basis. The amount of solar flaring now is unprecedented, and the peak should have ended in the year 2000, but now it's higher than ever. And the reason I bring up that, because that has a direct effect on our weather. It changes the jet streams, the 3 jet streams around our planet, such that the weather just is, you got cold where you should have hot, you got flooding, you got drought. I mean, just all kinds of crazy stuff is already happening, and is going to continue to get a lot worse prior to this event. In fact, there may be so much seismic activity and weather events going on at the time, people aren't even going to have time or inclination to even worry about this planet approaching, because they're dealing with just the preliminary effects themselves.
So many catastrophic side effects, I guess.
Exactly.
Where is Planet X now? If I had a telescope, could I see it?
Well, there are some people that are saying they have sighted Planet X, and not observatories now. Now, whether I don't believe that's been verified yet so far. I couldn't give you the coordinates off the top of my head or anything like that, because there may be a couple different objects coming in to this part of our solar system at this time. In fact, James McKinney says that when this planet comes in, it always brings with it other objects. And, sometimes what happens is, some of these objects hit each other and they go off in different directions, but for whatever reason they come back around the same time. So there should be other objects coming in at this time, maybe not as large as Planet X, that could, in fact, impact Earth. Now, like I said, Planet X doesn't impact Earth, but these other objects could impact Earth at a certain point.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the object that struck Jupiter not a few years ago, may have been one of the preliminary pre-objects that show up around the same time. So Planet X always brings its friends to the party when it comes in.
If you can call those friends.
Yeah, it does. It throws a party and brings its friends when it comes back around. And there may be some other objects coming in from completely different directions around the time that Planet X does. Maybe not the exact same time, but a couple of years afterwards, before. You're going to see a lot of pelting from even small asteroids, small meteors right before this event. So it's not just going to be the weather. You're going to have a lot of meteor showers going on.
So it should be quite a spectacle, outside.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I don't even know if you want to be there. Outside.
You may get hit.
Yeah, not just that. There's going to be some other interesting things that come up along the way. The volcanoes will be going off. There'll be a lot of hydrocarbons in the air. There'll be an unprecedented amount of electricity. There'll be passing plasmatic exchange between the planets. This will be like lightning that'll be going off in space itself. And this could ignite, parts of our atmosphere, and there may be blankets of fire falling in certain places. Other places after the shift may be flash freezing. If there's cloud cover where the new poles end up, and you have, let's say, a mile thick of cloud cover that's covering, 20 square miles, that would maybe reduce down to a quarter mile thick and fall as, large ice cube and just crush cities.
Whatever's underneath, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, the weatherman's going to have a hard time trying to
predict that.
all of this going on.
Let me mention your website once again. It's www.planetx2003.com. Now, your associate, I don't know if I'm calling your associate, your friend, your...
You're talking about Cindy?
James McKinney.
Oh, okay, James McKinney, right.
Yeah, he has his own website, too. I'm not sure. Is that www.jamesmckinney.com? Is that what that is?
Let's see, what is it? J.M. McKinney.
And that's McCanney.
We know you could just go to my website and click on his book, which I feature on my website, and it'll take you over to his website.
Okay, all right.
And there's another website, a very good one, that's a lot more detailed than mine, that I put the URL link on the homepage of my website you can go to.
Okay.
I think it's something like Details Here or something like that, Nibiru.com. I don't know exactly, but if you go to my website, you can find these other sources of information.
And now Nibiru, that's one thing. That's another name for Planet X, another synonym for Planet X.
Yeah, I might want to. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a man by the name of Zacharias Sitchin.
Russian?
Pardon me?
Is he the Russian that wrote the book?
The 12th Planet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back in 1976, he one of the few people on the planet who translated ancient Sumerian text. Now, this is probably one of the best ancient historical records of Planet X. I mean, these ancient Sumerians were they weren't cave people. They were not unsophisticated. Okay, they knew every planet in our solar system and identified all of them, and we just had to rediscover them within the last 100 years. And they knew about Planet X, or what they called Nibiru. Nibiru translates into planet of crossing because they understood it didn't orbit like the rest of our planets do in the elliptical plane that they do. It crossed the elliptical plane, so that's the reason why they named it Nibiru, or planet of crossing. They also call it the 12th planet. Now, why not the 10th planet, which is basically what X stands for, Roman numeral number 10? They also call it the 12th planet because they happen to count our moon and our sun as planets also. So that's what jacked it up to 12.
I see. It's interesting.
But some of the old other names are the Destroyer would be another name. Nemesis, Celestial Lord Shiva. I mean, they gave this planet, depending on what culture, names that are almost akin to God because they understood the power that this thing had when it passed by and what it did to their civilization or the entire world of civilizations when it passed by.
Yeah, I see you have on page 15, anyway, of the copy that I've got. There's a large drawing, a medieval drawing of the what's labeled destructive brown dwarf, and you have all these people fleeing in terror as these things rip across the sky.
Yeah, if you look close at that drawing, you'll see that the people are hysterical. Some are committing suicide. The city itself, the little village itself, is shaking, and there's obviously an earthquake going on. If you look at the sky, there's storms going on, which is what you can expect when this thing passes by. And you'll see this object is in the sky, and it's horizontal. It's not going to impact. I mean, the majority of the information you're getting from NASA and scientific sources that in order for something major to happen, you need an impact. It's not true. As James McKinney says in his work, Planet X, Comets, and Earth Changes, action at a distance is what happens to destroy planets sometime. In fact, Mars may have been a flourishing live planet at one time until a celestial body passed by and basically sucked the atmosphere off of it and its water too. Wow! I mean, this is what happens. These major mega events happen at a distance, not through impacts themselves. Although impacts, in fact, I understand from a triple doctorate that I recently got some information from, that the majority of cratering that happens on the moon and the Earth happens during the time of Nibiru or Planet X's passage. In fact, the same triple doctor told me that he attended a secretive government meeting whereby he got to see a live Hubble view, a link up to Hubble of this Planet X. And the only reason he even passed me the information is he said that because of my book and my work, he wouldn't have drew on his connections to become a part of this meeting. But the average person certainly wasn't going to be able to hear about or be a part of this meeting. But he was, because in fact, he thanked me for saving his life. He had a practice down in Florida, and he called me up and said, "Thank you for saving my life. 100% confirmed." Now, I've never seen it, but apparently he has, and drew on his sources. So, this is the kind of information that comes from me from people all over the world. Different insiders within the astronomical community that confided in me, and then shortly thereafter, when I put the information on the internet, usually their sources get cut off, which is an interesting part of the scenario. They'll get a flow of information about from their sources. I'll let it out on the internet, and then boom, they'll call me up and say, "Hey, I've been cut off completely from my colleagues. They won't pass me any more information," which shows you the level of connection that these controllers have. I mean, I've gotten a source in Germany that started passing me information, and people, German government officials started sitting outside of his house, and his information flow was cut off. I mean, he confirmed this from a completely separate source in St. Petersburg, Russia, a large observatory there. Told him that they knew it was going to pass sometime in 2003, and they'd been looking at it for a few years, and they were very worried about the substantial damage it was going to do when it passes. And then as soon as I started talking about the negotiations that he had with him, because he wanted a picture, suddenly they had to bow out of those negotiations for a picture of Planet X, that they were being pressured to stop the flow of information. So this cabal, this military-industrial complex that has it's basically a leech on the outside of all the governments of the world, the majority of them, they have connections all over the planet.
Apparently.
Yep.
Speaking of which, I mean, the information you're spreading obviously is going to cause a lot of, within those groups, is obviously going to cause a lot of, I wouldn't say panic, but a lot of retaliatory measures, I guess.
Oh, that I expect that, and I am because, see, these people, they consider themselves the powers that be. They're ones where the people that are paying them to do their little work actually are trillionaires. All right, and you don't even know their names. Okay, they're behind the scenes. They never make the newspapers. Okay, they're the ones pulling the strings. They're the ones that are most in fear because they have the most to lose. Okay, what they don't understand is they're being played. They are being played by spiritual forces. So when they try to counter me, when they try to suppress this information, they're putting focus on this information. They put their own guy on Art Bell to naysay this, let's say, okay, and they have done this already.
Okay.
And what happens is, see, what they don't understand is the spiritual forces themselves are the ones that are in control. And they are using them to get this information out. Because a lot of people out there, there are thousands of people that are getting dreams and visions throughout their entire life. And all they really have to do is hear it one time about Planet X. And it doesn't matter whether they hear it from a negative light or a positive light. The second they hear it, it registers, and they know it's true. So, like I said, I embrace these people that are trying to stop the information flow at this point, because they're playing into the hands of spiritual forces that want this information out to a certain group of people that should survive it.
No, I've read in an interview, I think it was Babel magazine,
Yeah.
that you'd experienced some harassment.
Yeah, one of these guys that were traced to Langley, Virginia, started hassling Langley, Virginia, by the way,
CIA
headquarters. Yeah. They traced a man that used to work for the DOD, traced these guys to the headquarters on the internet. They were constantly naysaying Planet X and setting up websites that make fun of me or try to go after my character, which has nothing to do with the information I put out, but this is the kind of countering that they do. They actually started hassling my dad's girlfriend because they tried to create a rift between my father and I, because my father has a website, and they wanted, I suppose, I'm assuming that they didn't want Hollywood to get wind of this, and because my dad, has significant connections within Hollywood, and I expected, since my dad is proud of me and my work, he put my information on his internet site, and they wanted to create a rift between my father and I to try to get him to take down my information on his website.
Uh-huh.
So they started hassling my dad's girlfriend. But my dad's girlfriend, they didn't understand, is an ex-MP officer in herself and wasn't about to take any shit from these guys. So that didn't work for him. It backfired on them. And again, a lot of the things that they're doing is backfiring on them. And it just gets the information out and makes it clear to people, hold it, this wouldn't be happening unless this guy's information, and I'm not saying it's me, it's the information I'm passing on from an array of sources, is either right over the target or right near it. They wouldn't be working so hard to counter it unless it was real. So they have actually created themselves key pieces of evidence by what they are doing. And that's why it's significant, and that's why I embrace them. They come to all my talks, and I welcome them. And when they try to discredit me, I welcome the energy that they're bringing to the talk. I mean, I put my arm around their shoulders, so to speak, and cut off their legs at the same time.
I'm sure one of the first things they probably go after is the fact that you don't have any graduate degrees or any undergraduate degrees. You're not what they would consider a scientist or an astronomer or anything like that. Is that one of the things that they attack first off?
Well, that occasionally, I suppose that's part of it. But I embrace them when they start doing that, because what's the point of making me the focus? My book is full of credentialed people. I work with a master of science who has his own book about Planet X, Comets and Earth Changes. James McKinney is his name.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so they really can't attack me for not being a scientist, because I'm a researcher, and part of the research that I picked up are from scientists themselves. So they can't really attack me, because attacking me actually makes people think. They do it though, and in fact I welcome it, because when people see that I'm under attack and they're trying to make me the focus as opposed to the information and the informational sources, which are PhDs and scientists themselves, that makes people think, why is he being attacked for this? That's kind of unusual. Why would a guy be discredited for putting out information from credible sources? That in itself is a big red flag to people who've got half a brain for common sense to figure these things out.
They say, hold the phone, right?
Yeah, hold the phone. Something's not right with this situation. Why are you making Mark Hazelwood the focus? Why are you creating a bad reputation about him on the internet? I mean, kill the messenger and the message goes away? I don't think so.
What other websites besides yours and McKinney's would you lead maybe people that are interested in this kind of thing too?
Well, okay. If you go to my e-group messages on my website and you comb through the e-group messages, there's actually one post, and I can't really identify which one it is.
Uh-huh.
And there are 300 messages there to sift through, but one post has probably 50 or 60 different websites you can go to. But you know what? It wasn't too long ago, a few months ago, you could type in Planet X into a search engine and 1 million hits will come up.
Uh-huh.
Nowadays, 1,800,000 hits will come up. So, I don't know what's on those websites, whether it's disinformation or real information, but there's a lot of information out there now about Planet X, and it's increasing exponentially. You can type in Mark Hazelwood into any significant search engine. I think I put it through Google the other day, and 489 website will come up. And a lot of those are just disinformation people, people that work for the CIA that are just doing their best writing, fantasies, fabrications about me, trying to say I'm some sort of scam artist. How am I scamming people, by the way? I don't understand this. They're just embellishing and embellishing, trying to make me some fiend, and you think to yourself, hold on, what's going on here? Why are you giving this guy a bad reputation? He just wrote a book about Earth Changers. There are hundreds of people that wrote a book about Earth Changers. Why are you attacking him for being a scammer? A scammer of what? Why are you attacking him for profiteering? There's a lot of people out there selling books about Earth Changers. Why attack him for making money off of his book? How do you get information out? You can't give it away free. It doesn't get out there. Anyone that writes a book that puts it on the internet and gives it away free, it doesn't get out very far. The only way to get information out there far and wide is to write a book and sell it. It's the way this society works. And all the other change authors out there, I might say, why aren't they being attacked for profiteering? Why is it me? Because I think I got their ticket so close. I think I'm so close over the target here that they've got to create this information, and it's working against them. It's backfiring on them left and right. So I embrace them. Come on, keep it up, keep it up. It's working. It's working.
Well, Mark, I'd like to thank you for coming out, being on the show. I want to mention again your website if anyone's interested. Planet X. Blindsided, Planet X Passes in 2003, Earth Changes by Mark Hazelwood. It's available at his website at www.planetx2003.com. Thanks a lot, Mark, for coming on the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been my pleasure. Take care.